If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey guys, welcome back to another Weird Wednesday. I'm Ashers, and this is
Pat O.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Yeah, we're recording a little bit earlier than usual.
Yeah, we are. Things have been strange for the both of us. We are both kind of dealing with like COVID things.
Right.
It's terrible. At the same time. I think I caught COVID from you and your family.
I wish. No, I mean, it was my kid got it at school last week, and he came home on Friday. Well, we got notified on Friday afternoon at like 1:00 that there had been an outbreak, and of course they don't tell you too much info because of HIPAA, and they want to protect people's privacy, and they don't want kids to ostracize each other. So they didn't really tell us a whole lot in the email, just that an outbreak had occurred.
Yeah.
And, come get your kid and he'll be off for the next 10 days. And so we got him, we asked him like, hey, what's up? And he goes, oh, I think it was this girl in the 5th grade. We have recess together. And, he's not talking to 5th grade girls at recess.
Yeah.
He's not talking to 5th grade girls, period. So I'm like, okay, well, there's no chance you had any contact with this person. And kind of went on about our business this weekend. That night, me and him watched Mortal Kombat, which was pretty all right.
Yeah.
And he had a little bit of a fever, but nothing crazy. Same thing Saturday. And Sunday was fine. And then Monday, we come to find out that through the parents talking to each other, not because of anything that the school released, that it wasn't somebody in the 5th grade that had it. It was someone directly in his class. And that it was somebody that we knew that he was actually friends with and played with at recess. So based on that, the fact that we felt that it was a legitimate exposure, and the fact that he did have a little bit of a fever on Friday, we went and took him. We did the rapid testing around here on yesterday afternoon, and sure as shit, he's got it. So yeah, he's COVID positive, and me and my wife have both been vaccinated, so we're not terribly concerned. But I still might get tested tomorrow because it's the responsible thing to do. Even if you've been vaccinated, you could still carry it. You could still. The doctor was saying yesterday was like, you've been vaccinated, but you've been vaccinated against SARS or something else, and that you could still technically get COVID-19. So I didn't take him into the doctor's office to get tested. That was something my wife did, and they only let one person in at a time. So I didn't get the full story on that. And her and I were both kind of confused. But I think it's one of those things where, like, I don't want to compare it to AIDS, but you don't necessarily die of AIDS. It's when you get AIDS, you die of pneumonia or something. You die of like all these other things. And I think that that's maybe how the vaccine works, is that it protects you against part of the virus or part of the symptoms, but you can still get part of it or something.
Well, it doesn't, because your body recognizes it. So most of the time when you get things like COVID-19 or when you have a fever, okay, a fever isn't caused because of a virus that you have. A fever is your body's reaction. So when people die from COVID, well, unless they have a comorbidity, like in my case, being a diabetic, the problem is if I get COVID, it shoots my blood sugar way high. My pancreas just stops working altogether, and then I get thick syrup blood, and that can't really move to the body. And so therefore, I guess really the diabetes kills me. But I probably wouldn't have had that happen had I not gotten the COVID, So normally, and then in other cases where like it's healthy individuals that get it, it's because their body attacks itself trying to get rid of this virus. And so but that's why people with autoimmune issues are such an issue, because people with autoimmune issues, the body will attack itself more even when they're not sick. It'll constantly be under attack. And so, when you get something like a virus, it can be no matter what it is, it can be very dangerous, because then your body goes into like way overdrive, and it's like, oh, we need to live, this is what's killing us. It doesn't really know that it's your own cells that it's killing. So I mean, that is kind of, but so in the case of like a vaccine, well, for one, the jury's still out on whether or not these variants that we have, if the vaccine protects against those, right? So it depends on what type of COVID you have. COVID-19 is a variant, but then it has all these like micro variants to it. So it's like, well, but it's the same thing as like the flu vaccine. People are like, well, I got the flu vaccine and I still got the flu. Yeah, you can still get the flu. It's just, you can. However, it protects pretty well against it. I mean, so it's not that the chance is not there. It's just that you could either get a strain of flu that that particular vaccine doesn't protect, or you can still just straight up get the flu and your body is not going to overreact because it's seen it before. It's just like having someone knock on your door. If a stranger knocks on your door, okay, you're like, who the fuck is this? Why is this person at my house? Who is this? But if your buddy comes over to your house, you know who they are. You've seen them before. You recognize them. So you're not as alarmed. It's the same concept. It's just, cells.
You could tell your mom's a nurse.
She's not a nurse. She's a medical lab tech, but
whatever. It's nice. I'm glad that we have this aspect of the show. People that know what the fuck they're talking about when it comes to that, instead of just fucking made up monsters and shit.
I took 2 years of anatomy and physiology. Also, I love that shit.
I don't know if I mentioned this. I took microbiology as well because I heard that that's where all the nursing students were.
Yeah.
So that was my lab course, and it did not work out very well for me. But whatever. I know what a lipid is. I think it's a fatty sugar thing.
I don't know that much.
All right, whatever.
I think lipids are.
No, that's good. And I'm definitely getting tested tomorrow too. Thank you. That solidified it for me.
Yeah, definitely go ahead and get tested. I mean, because there are still people, well, like me, I'm not eligible for the vaccine yet. And now I'm in this predicament where I think that I may have COVID because I'm having symptoms, but I don't know. We were just talking. I mentioned, it could be the shitty Midwestern weather that's causing an allergy flare up, which I don't typically have allergy issues. Or, it could be COVID, or it could be something else entirely. But right. I got tested because that's the right thing to do. And, that's especially for somebody like me who needs to be extra cautious. And, if I do have it, it's better to know early on than to wait until it gets worse because it can get bad quick. So, that kind of where I'm at today. But yeah, that's been what's going on in this world. I didn't really do anything exciting for the weekend, but I do have something exciting to share. Remember how we've been talking about these cattle mutilations lately?
Yeah.
There's more. It's still happening. It's still, which I guess in Oregon, it's kind of just been the popular thing to do, I guess, is to mutilate cattle. I don't know. But the cases are they're still steady. They're not slowing down. So now they've had people looking more into it. There's a full investigation into these mutilations, and a little bit more information has come out. A cattle vet has been looking into them, and she's saying that these are not natural causes of death. So a couple of things to note what they're finding in these, and so when we talk about cattle, it is cow that's being mutilated. The typical, missing eyeballs, missing tongues, missing rectums. But then other things like the reproductive organs are gone without an incision being made. I'm assuming that this is in the same case as with missing rectum, so maybe they're removing them that way. I mean, that's some way they got to be removing them. Random patches of hair missing, but not like just kind of patchy hair. These are like precise squares of hair missing in different spots. Bite marks, but no blood in these things. So just a lot of really weird stuff. Some of them have pinpricks in certain parts of their body. So there are a lot of people, the skeptics are out in full force with this one. Of course, they say that these things are typical with predatory, birds that are scavengers. However, that doesn't account for the missing patches of hair. And how the fuck is a bird going to remove reproductive organs with no incision? That's just not possible. So that is kind of what's going on. There's just kind of more and more happening. And then the headless seals situation is still.
I remember that one.
Oh, you remember them? Do you? They are still up for debate. Now, this is just, I don't think anything new has happened since last week. As far as I've seen. However, now it's kind of become like my own personal rabbit hole. And so there are these, neat folks that I talk to. Again, if you follow me on social medias, you probably already have a pretty good idea. I use the Clubhouse app a lot, and I am on there with the Bigfoot Society podcast folks, and then a bunch of other great cryptozoologists. And we also have a Discord server where we kind of discuss upcoming shows and things like that. But that's where so Saturdays we have something called 5 Minute Cryptid News, and we all kind of bring our own stories and we kind of talk about the news and whatnot on every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern on Clubhouse. And I'm plugging on my own show. That's really that's hilarious. Anyway, so we post the articles there. I posted the Headless Seals article, and somebody else had mentioned that was interesting because they had a guy who was also had a big concern with these headless seals coming up on shore. He's found them in the same area, and there was other stuff that the guy claims that he caught a video of a dragon. And it's not, it's just a dragonfly. I mean, it looks exactly like a dragonfly. He says it's a baby dragon. He's weird. But, that's still, but that still doesn't account for why he's finding headless seals. So,
right.
I don't know. I just think it's getting closer and closer, Pat. I think we need to do this cattle mutilation episode soon.
Yeah, I'm down for that. That's been on our short list for a while.
Yeah, it definitely has, and it seems to start being more and more relevant. So I'm definitely down to talk about it. But that's really all the news that I have this week. Do you have anything to share?
Yeah, I guess 2 updates. We supposed to be having another interview with the person that we talked about last week with the Masonic temples and the mass shootings and all that stuff. An update to that story is that they claim there was a fire behind their parents' house last week. They had spent all week out of town visiting their family, which is the same area, Kenosha, Wisconsin, where all this stuff is supposedly going on. And when they left town, that afternoon, they left town to head back towards my neck of the woods. That night a fire had broken out behind their parents' house, and they sent pictures and chat logs, which of course all that stuff can be faked, but it seemed legit. I did try to look it up in the news, but it didn't necessarily make the news. But that's like you pointed out, sometimes you'd be surprised what finds its way into the paper and what doesn't.
Yeah.
So that thing is still ongoing, and we're actually me and Astrid are supposed to have a call with them.
And I'm excited.
With the next day or two to kind of keep unraveling that stuff, because that is that's super interesting.
It definitely could be something. I mean, the fact of the matter is that, I follow this person also on social media, and they had mentioned this on social media that this fire had happened. And, what was really telling to me was that they kind of, they were lucid enough to say that, either this is just a crazy life coincidence and life just sucks sometimes, or this is a big, threat by the DA and all this,
right.
You know what I mean? But they were able to actually kind of know that there's a difference between the two. And so, I don't know. I'm very interested. Pat was the one that spoke with this individual. I have not spoken with this individual except for in passing, just on Twitter, but not directly. So I'm excited to see what comes out of this, because I've heard a lot of stuff. I've heard the original phone call and whatnot, but I definitely still have a lot more questions. So we'll see how that continues.
And I mean, so today's show topic, as you could tell from the title, I know what it is this time.
Do you?
Is we're doing the Manson Family stuff, and the book that I read that I'll be referencing today. It took the author 20 years to write, and it just kind of keeping that in perspective with this thing is okay, so somebody tried to write this the definitive book about the Manson family killings, and it took him 20 years. If it takes us 3 weeks and 2 telephone calls to get this show topic nailed away, I think that's a fair amount of research.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not everything comes to you neatly gift wrapped with everything included in a little box. Sometimes it takes a little bit, and you have to do a couple calls and you have to do a little digging, and then you get the story, or you find out there is no story.
Yeah.
You're fucking
and I was kind of saying that today. I'm sure you saw Pat and I we're friends on Facebook, so it's official. But but I shared a memory from last year, right? Talking about my documentary. I was so proud to
Yeah.
have this specific individual come on. And, it just kind of like hit me that like, shit, it's been a year since like that happened. And then I'm like, while I'm like sharing this status update and like kind of adding more to it, I'm like kind of disappointed in myself. Like, what the fuck? I haven't got this documentary out yet. Like, man, I've been promising
Dude, there's a
people.
fucking pandemic.
Well,
Do some
right.
slack.
You're right. There's a pandemic, and it is an ongoing investigation. Like, it's not. This is
Right.
probably not something that I will ever stop. I will probably never stop chasing the Mothman for the rest of my life, unless I find him. And in which case, great, wonderful. But if I don't, I will probably still continue to chase him for the rest of my life. And so, making a documentary on an ongoing investigation. I mean, yes, I could just repeat the story of Point Pleasant and point out the same shit that everybody else has, but that's not what I'm doing. So, but sometimes these things, they take a while. You mentioned this guy, it took him a while to do this. Investigations aren't just like cut and dry. I mean, people don't realize, how much work actually goes into each individual person and their individual stories. Sometimes it's just a random email that you get and you're like, oh, hey, I saw the Doulahan, like the one guy, or, sometimes it's fucking Chad and Alta who have had a lifetime of high strangeness, and you just can't possibly sit down and get the full story in one go. It's going to take a long time, which hopefully I'm going to have them on the show very soon. It's just that I have to unpack what it is they're telling me first before I can bring it to you guys. So, it just depends. It just depends. With this individual, in question, are we going to know more definitively after the phone call tomorrow? In my own personal experience, probably not. No. We'll know a little bit more, but are we going to hit the finish line? Probably not. It just depends if more stuff continues to happen, especially because we're seeing this in real time. But it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. That's why I do what I do. I love investigating. So,
Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret.
ooh,
Every single substantial literary work that I've completed, manuscript, whatever, I've done during National Novel Writing Month. And I'd say about 90% of the short films that I've made, I've done for festivals or competitions where there was a deadline involved.
okay.
I operate very well with defined
Yeah.
pass or fail deadlines.
Yeah.
Where either you get it done by the 5th or you don't get it done. And that I've realized about myself is that I work very well within that structure. And if it wasn't for deadlines and me getting shit done by having to have things done, not like I'm setting a
Yeah.
deadline for myself, like I'm gonna get this thing written by the end of the weekend. No, because I fucking don't care about that. But if it's like I'm involved with something that gives me a deadline where I have to have it done by a certain date, then I apply myself more to get it done by then. So I think that's just part. And I'm not to compare myself to you, like
No, yeah.
to put
No,
me
I
down, but like
agree.
that's the only reason I've gotten shit done is because I've put myself in positions where I had to, or I had to clear cut admit defeat. But I don't think that applies to you in this situation.
I mean, I need to really, like, I know for sure that there are two, and it doesn't, like, when I put it in this way, it's not that bad. There are two major things that we need to hit before we are ready to put this documentary into post. And that is a Chicago investigation. And that is also speaking with Tanya Derenberger. Now, I can't make Tanya talk to me. She says she wants to, but she has MS and she's old, and we have a pandemic going on, right? So, but now that it's getting like nice outside, I would like to see if I can like set up some type of outside meeting with her, because when I initially asked her, it was starting to be kind of fall. So now that we're getting back into like nicer weather, then I can set that up with her. And then of course we just have to set a date for the Chicago thing and go out and do it. Those are the two major things that I feel like need to happen before this is finished, because that was the dream in the first place, was that this was not just going to be one documentary. It's going to be a series of documentaries about different things. And so we're kind of starting to we've been talking about going to Kentucky and, investigating there and doing this and that and the other, but that's a whole nother documentary. That has nothing to do with Mothman. It does. I mean, that's kind of the point of the documentary. That's kind of is to show that all these things are synced together. But this one is about Mothman. So I need to just really focus in on what that is and what that means, and then, take it from there. But I agree with the deadline thing. I like deadlines. That's why I do this podcast every single week, because if I just did it whenever, it would never get done. And
That's
so,
very true. That's very, very true.
and if I get lazy and I'm like, oh no, I can just skip that week, then I'm going to skip the next and the next and the following. And so therefore, I'm not going to be, I can't be that person, because I do like a good deadline. Now that's really hard to do when you work for yourself. So
yeah. Oh, I'm very persuasive when it comes to convincing myself that something doesn't matter.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Fuck
Yes,
that.
I will choose laziness every time. But the downfall to that is that on the flip side, I don't get downtime. I really, I am always fucking working on something. And I don't know if that's because, like, in my head, I have set little deadlines for these things, little specific things. Like I said, Tuesday's always our podcast day. I've got another podcast that I record on Wednesdays over on Clubhouse. I've got other Clubhouse things. Like, I know that that's going to happen at that day and time. Right. So I have to work my life around that. And then, so in the meantime, then I'm like, well, I got all this shit that I have to do. What do I do? And I just kind of start working on a little bit of everything at once, and I don't recommend it. So sorry, my voice is going to be sound like shit because I'm phlegmy and I'm sick and it sucks. So just deal with it this week.
It makes you sound like Jessica Rabbit.
Well, okay, I'll take it. So anyway, now that we've gone off on that tangent. So did you have anything else you wanted to share?
No, I guess just to tease it out, because it'll happen at some point and hopefully motivate you to fucking get your shit together. So Asher said, brought up the idea of doing a like ancestry episode.
Yes.
Where we were both going to get DNA tests and then compare the results. And I ran out and did mine, and hers is sitting in the box on her counter.
My result is that this is my result. I got mine back. My result is that I'm a lazy fuck. That's what it is.
No, I understand. But I got mine back, and they came in last night, and I got lots to talk about, but I don't want to ruin the show. So I feel like I'm gonna internalize it all for the time being. I already, fucking bothered my wife about it this morning, and I'm still waiting to hear back from my sister. But yeah, I was like, it was just be prepared for a hornet's nest, because I got mine last night, and I'm not happy with it.
I'm so nervous now. I don't know what this.
I'm also not 100%, and this is something else we'll go into in the show, but I'm not 100% sure of the accuracy of it, because I'll just give one thing away, just because I hate to be a complete and total cock tease. They go through your like physical genetic traits that you should or should not have exhibited, right? Mm-hmm. Based on your genetic makeup, there is a 76% chance that you have or do not have this specific trait.
Right.
And one of mine was back hair. And it said that I was, a very high percentage likelihood that I would not have back hair. And I am completely fucking covered in hair.
You're a bear.
From head to fucking toe, everywhere. And I just looked at that. And there was others too. And I could go down the list and be like, I was reading to my mom this morning and she was cracking up. But I think that those being a little off gives me hope that there was other aspects of it that were a little off as well. But that's something to be, but I will say this, there was an amazing synchronicity that happened because we used the test that you suggested. If I had gone with the test that I was going to get, half of what I ever talk about would not be there. But okay. So it was crazy that you suggested this one. You said, no, this is the one we're going to use. Go buy this one. And I did it. And it made all the difference in the world in a certain respect. So, yeah, I'm going to leave the audience hanging, and hopefully that motivates you to spit in the fucking tube and walking into the fucking post office, because it took about 2 weeks. Like, you can go back and check the show notes, but
it didn't take that long. Actually, I was really surprised because it says like 6 weeks or so.
No. It was telling me it would be ready by May 3rd to May 13th, and it was ready on April 26th.
Oh, so it was early.
Yeah, so it was quick. And if you download the app, which obviously you're going to do, and you check along with it every step of the way. It says like, oh, hey, look, it arrived at our carrier facility. Oh, look, we're sequencing the genomes now. Like, it walks you through everything. And then when you go to look at the info for, I mean, they email you the shit too.
Yeah.
Once it's done, they email you the reports, but you can check it all via the app. So you can do screen grabs and show people like, look what this fucking says.
I'm excited to see what mine says, but now I have to wait for my COVID test to come back. So, so we'll see. Hopefully this week. I don't know. One of these days, guys. One of these. It's okay. We got a bunch of great, wonderful guests lined up for the next couple of weeks, actually. So
yeah, we're in a good place.
Yeah, right. So it'll be, you guys will be happy anyway, and then you get to have the boring genealogy episode, I guess. Maybe you don't find it boring. I don't know. I think it's interesting, but who knows? We'll see what people think. But I'm excited. I'm excited to find out what you found out. I'm excited to find out whatever it is I'm going to find out, and I can't wait. So I think it'll be fun. Well, we'll see. I tell you what, mine's probably going to say that like there's a 70% chance that I should have had red hair, and
that's not natural.
No.
What made you pick red then?
You really didn't know that my hair wasn't really red?
I'm confused by wigs and eyelashes.
What's confusing about them? You put them on.
I know, but I don't know when girls are wearing. I was at a bar one. This actually wasn't too long ago. I was at a bar with some people, and it was a friend of a friend. And we were sitting there, and we were all just talking. And this other person walked up to this girl that we were sitting with and said, "Hey, do you have any eyelash glue?" And one of mine's coming off. And the girl said, "No, these are actually magnetic." And the conversation that they had was blowing my fucking mind, because I was like, wait a minute. You're both wearing fake eyelashes, but one of yours is coming off, and you got fucking magnets holding yours on? Holy shit. I had no idea what the fuck was happening. And when I worked in the hotel industry, there was, the girls at the front desk, the popular ones at least, were very attractive women. They were always very well coiffed.
Sure.
And they would wear like wigs, and I was like, "You change your hair a lot. Your hair looks really good today." Or like, "Oh my god, you dyed your hair." And she's like, "Pat, it's a wig." I'm like, "Get the fuck out of here. Like, what do you look like underneath that?" Like, it's just the transformative nature of women sometimes like really throws me for fucking loop. So
mine's actually not that bad. I can say that a lot of women, they do look, drastically different between like when they have their face on. That's what I call it, my face. When they have their face on and they have their face off, which, as people have seen on my social media, is like, I don't mind posting a picture of myself with no makeup on. Like,
yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about. Your hair's, I didn't know that you dyed your hair.
So my hair, which I'm really surprised that you didn't know that. I don't know. Well, because I'll post pictures of my roots are showing. Now, see, my roots, that's the thing. So, so I'm naturally blonde, like white blonde, like stark white. Yeah. Yeah. That's why I draw my eyebrows on, because they're pretty much non-existent if I don't, right? So it looks kind of strange, if I don't have them on. And I have eyebrows. I have them. You just can't, they're so white, you can't see them. All my body hair is completely white. I don't have to shave if I don't want to. Because you can't see it. And but no, my hair is blonde, naturally blonde. I have not actually seen my natural hair color since I was pregnant, and that was almost 10 years ago. And except for my roots. So my roots will come out, and then when my roots start coming out, then my hair, the red kind of starts to fade, and it kind of becomes more of like an orangey color. And when I go out and about, people compliment me more my roots are growing out than when I freshly dye it, because they think that like the roots are on purpose, and it's weird, and it's not. And I'm just like, no, girl, this is just called I'm lazy and didn't do my hair. They seem to like it. Now, I didn't choose the red life. Red chose me. This is what I tell people all the time, which apparently is a South Park joke, and I didn't know it. But I tell people I'm transgender because I should have been born a redhead, because I have a redheaded personality. So. But no, it's not real. Of course it's not fucking real.
The devil's daughter.
That's me. So, but it's okay. I have been adopted. Like, I have actual like ginger friends, and they've like adopted me. They're like, "Oh no, you're fine. You're part of the family." Well, our good friend, the Reverend, Crimson Nicholas, he's a ginger, and he's accepted me. So,
did you post that Lucille Ball quote? About a man should know the love of a redhead woman. At least every man should know the love of a redhead woman.
No, I've never heard
at least once in his life. Yeah, it was. I almost reposted it because I've known the insides of a couple, and it's pretty sweet.
That's gross.
No, devil's daughter,
But
man.
you know what? Hey, that's a really good point. I mean, and I understand. I like the appeal of being a redhead. It's just kind of a whole. Once you choose to do that, it just becomes like a lifestyle. And now, for a while, I was changing it. I was going purple in the wintertime, and then once like the warmer ones, I would do red. But the last time I did, every time I do the purple, like every time I do any other color besides red, because I have dyed in other colors, it just does. I don't feel like me. I don't feel like I'm, in my own skin. And like, now at this point, and we were talking about this when we did the Chucky and Tiffany photo shoot. Because the photographer also, like, she dresses up more than anything, more than taking pictures, she dresses up. And we were talking about like dressing up, and she had like some suggestion with something that I should do. And I'm like, yeah, but then I have to like either get a wig or dye my hair, and I can't dye my hair because I'm a redhead. That's what everybody knows me. It's like my calling card. I got red hair. So
Yeah.
it's kind of weird now to think of me as not having red hair, but no, it's fake.
Purple I'm not a fan of, just because it always comes across as black to me. Like, it's always too dark. Maybe that's based on part of the problem is that I'm a little bit colorblind, so like I
Oh,
see shit a little off. But yeah, the purple never really looks like purple. When I think of purple, I think of Grimace. And when I think, you know what I
you
mean,
think
like
Grimace is sexy?
Grimace. No, I mean like that color purple. And when
Oh.
girls dye their hair purple, it's usually like it's like a little bit lighter than black. Like, it always just seems black to me. It always
Yeah.
just looks black. And
Yeah.
I do like a good like electric blue bob wig.
Oh, yeah.
I think those are nice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I used to dye my hair all kinds of colors, and eventually I landed on it was before I would like dye my hair different colors, but I'd always land back on black. And even though I kind of miss having the black hair, because I had more of like the Elvira, Morticia Adams kind of aesthetic going on there, I don't feel like I look nearly as goth with my red hair. As weird as that might seem, that's just how I feel. And so, back then I would do the black hair, but then I change it. I mean, I've done everything. I like the pastel colors, but they're hard to match eyebrows too. And so that's difficult because when you change your hair, you got to change your eyebrows. And it has been a science to get the perfect color of eyebrow for myself.
I used to have blue hair or bleach my hair
Do
when
it.
I was younger.
Do it again. Do it now.
I don't have enough hair now.
All right, the rest of it just falls out. It's like, nope.
No, unless I do my back hair, my shoulder hair.
Yeah, you should.
To match. You're worried about matching your eyebrows, trying to match your shoulders. Shit.
We'll dye it all blue.
Oh, God.
We'll dye it all purple. You look like Grimace.
Oh.
All right, that's enough of that. That's not what the people are here for. The people are here for something very specific this week.
Sure.
Which I'm excited to talk about. So last week we kind of gave you guys a tease. Sorry we got high.
I'm not. I'll do it again too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'll happen again. We got high. We kind of just got talking about the news. It was just kind of a free-for-all kind of a roundtable episode, which is fine. We don't really get to do those often. So, it was kind of nice to just kind of talk about whatever. But it is still April. This will be the last episode in April, and this is going to wrap up our theme of drugs this month.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited about it. So, we were talking about Charles Manson and the Manson family, and we were just kind of talking about the kind of the times and how they were, kind of, it was, the 60s. So everybody's all into this love and peace and sex and, drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So Pat's been reading this book. Pat, do you want to talk about the book a little bit?
It is called Chaos: Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s.
Yeah. So the reason why we kind of brought this up was because right before the Manson episode, we talked about MK Ultra. And
right.
MK Ultra is a very real thing that happened, where the government was experimenting with drugs in many different ways. They were experimenting to try to make kind of super soldiers or super assassins with drugs. They were experimenting with, I know there was, definitely different illnesses to try to treat with drugs. And they were experimenting with torture and drugs, all kinds of stuff with drugs for about, at minimum, like 20 years? I mean, at minimum, right? It's probably still going on. So we kind of got on the topic of Manson a little bit. Now, Manson has a really, everybody knows that the Manson family were at Spawn Ranch doing a bunch of drugs, right? And a lot of people believe that the reason why it was so easy for Manson to cultivate a cult, I guess, was because these people were under the influence of drugs for the most part, and they were dependent. And he was able to kind of to brainwash them using drugs. And again, that's kind of what MK Ultra was all about, was brainwashing people using drugs. But what if it was what if it was Manson? What if Manson was the one that was actually brainwashed? And that's kind of what we're going to get into. I guess I don't know exactly. I didn't read the book, so I don't know.
I finished it today, and it was fucking long, and I'm glad that we can do. I finished it. We can do this episode. I can put it on the shelf, and I could start reading Starship Troopers. I've been dying to fucking read that book, but obviously you can only read one book at a time.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the deal. When I was reading this thing, I almost wanted to like be taking like notes so that when we did this episode, I could like reference like just go through everything and do specific dates and people's names and acronyms, because there's so many acronyms and like all different kinds of shit. And I thought that, you know what, if I did that, I'd be doing a disservice to the author, whose name is Tom O'Neill. And I think that honestly, I'm going to give you a very fuzzy around the edges. I'm going to give you more info than you had coming into this show. But as far as the specifics of the details, I do want to encourage our audience to pick up this book and read it, because we had talked about this before, and you were like, "Oh, that book's $50." I don't know what the fuck you were looking at. I got this thing for like 15 off Amazon.
Yeah, I don't know why it showed up for me as like $50-something. It was weird.
Yeah, maybe it was a first edition or a hardcover or some shit.
It could have been.
I got the soft cover off Amazon for $15, and it showed at my house in 2 days. So if you're interested in any of this stuff, and what's crazy about this book, once again, just giving it kind of an overview, is that it was really like a perfect read for me, because I am into the Manson stuff. I'm into the lurid Polanski sex shit from the 60s. I'm into the CIA stuff, and I'm into the MK Ultra shit. And I think that if you were only interested in one aspect of the story, you might find the other aspects tedious. But because all of this stuff is shit that interests me,
Yeah.
it was like I was constantly engaged. I'm constantly learning new stuff about shit that I care about.
Right.
I don't read a whole lot of new fiction or nonfiction unless it's like the biography or an autobiography of somebody that I particularly am interested in. Unfortunately, I don't read a lot of true crime, and this book may actually change that if it's cases that I'm super drawn to. Which I now realize involve copious amounts of sex and drugs. But I will say this: like, this book is worth checking out. So if I'm not going to outline the whole entire book and then regurgitate it on the podcast and ruin everything in it.
Sure.
Fucking read it. It's $15. Start an OnlyFans for a month and you'll have enough, and go out and buy it, and it'll be money well spent. Because it was very educational, very, 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 very. I mean, the Kennedy assassination. There's an entire chapter on that and how that factors into all of this. Which wow. I mean, well, yes, which I and the author even says, I when I saw it going down this rabbit hole, I pray to God that it wouldn't take me here, because now everyone would think I'm really fucking crazy. And it went down there, and it was completely legit. And he's got everything's backed up, everything's referenced. He's got there's no conjecture in here unless it's clearly outlined as such.
Right.
You know what I mean? This was a meticulously researched, for 20 fucking year book. He started working on an article for Premier Magazine in around 1999 for the 30th anniversary of the killings, and the book didn't come out until 2019 because it took him 20 years to get his facts straight and shit, and it was worth it. So.
And who is this guy? What does he do? You know what he does? Does he do anything for a living?
Well, for the past 20 years, he's been writing this book.
Well, besides writing books.
Yeah, no, well, that was it. I mean, that's kind of part of like the subplot of this book, is how this whole thing took over his life. So yeah, originally he was he was a journalist that wrote for like the Village Voice and the New York Times and Premier Magazine, and they just threw him this fluff piece. Hey, we're coming up on the 30th anniversary of the Manson family murders. Can you do a relatively small article about the aftershocks felt through Hollywood and the way it changed the scene, and some of the people that were still active in Hollywood at the time
Yeah.
were around back then. They were young stars: Jack Nicholson, Warren Beatty, Candice Bergen, the Beach Boys, stuff like that. Like, you could find these people, you can go talk to these people. And when he started to do that, he started to realize like no one wanted to talk about it, and he started to kind of unravel and find inconsistencies with the case. And that he kept digging, and Premiere Magazine gave him extensions because they believed in the story, and he was finding good evidence. And then eventually it outgrew Premiere Magazine, and he had a publisher giving him money to research it. And then that kind of fell apart in like the last leg of it, and his parents had to basically loan him money so that he could finish doing his research, and he did. And obviously now the book's out. But it was a long he literally spent 20 years of his life doing nothing but working on this case.
Wow.
And filing Freedom of Information Act requests.
Yeah.
And interviewing people and going all over the United States and abroad and trying to track down these people and where they moved to and all this stuff. And it shows. It's a crazy fucking story. It's a crazy story.
Okay.
And I don't know if you want to talk about like the bigger picture and then I fill in the blanks, or I don't know how you want to do this.
Well, I mean, so the first instance where I thought that, and because I don't know exactly the details, I guess is kind of what I'm getting at. But the first instance that I had where Charles Manson may have been wrongfully convicted was in the fact that he was engaged to that girl. What was her name? Afton something. I can't remember her name, and I really should know her name right now. Hold on one second. I'm gonna pull it up. Darn it. Come on. Where is it? No, I don't want any of that right now.
Jesus, you should have taken fucking notes.
I know, I should have. I had it pulled up. I was doing the right thing, but then I got COVID sick. Afton Burton, that's her fucking name. And she started speaking to Charles Manson when she was 17 years old. And back in, I think 2014 or 2015, kind of in recent years, there was this big announcement that they were engaged and they were going to get married. And, people were like, why? But she wouldn't really come out and talk about it. So eventually they launched this website, and she did start talking about it. She was like, well, the reason why we're getting married is because I believe that he's innocent. We have proof to back up the fact that he's innocent. And in order for me to access the records that I need to access to, get him set free, we have to be married. And I just thought that this was crazy. And you see this shit all the time. There's a lot of women that fall for like these crazy killers and stuff like that. That's not unheard of. I mean, it's gross, but it happens. And especially her, she definitely seemed like, she was attention seeking. Like her name was Afton, which is a weird name to begin with, but she changed it to Star and was going by Star. And, so she just seemed like one of those people. But then they launched the website, and I remember like kind of in real time viewing this website. And they were discussing different aspects about the case that were incorrect. So the claim that they were making was that Charles Manson had absolutely nothing to do with these murders, that Tex had most everything to do with the murders for the most part, which I don't know if you know anything about prison life. Unfortunately, I know a lot about prison life, and every single person in prison is innocent. Right. I didn't know if you knew that or not, but that's what they all say that. I didn't do this. But, the claim was that the reason why they used Charles Manson was because he was so, I don't want to say woke, but he was so woke and he had such visions. I mean, people really did think that he was some type of prophet. And, this person kind of believed that he may have been, and that he was a threat to security and that he was a political prisoner. And they were just simply trying to make an example out of him because they needed to silence him and needed to silence the rest of the movement. So, like I said, I don't know if the book talks about anything like any of that.
No, it doesn't bring up the website at all, but I'm interested to see when the website went live.
Well, so I had a really hard time finding that website. Okay. Now
It's mansondirect.com.
Manson Direct. Okay. Well, how did you find it so easily? I don't
Because
understand.
I'm very good at using Google after being on a show with you for about a year now.
I was trying to find it before this and I couldn't find it anywhere, and I don't know why. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of really, I guess it is mansondirect.com. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that is it. Um, but we had just kind of touched on it a little bit, but no, this was a big thing. And, you know, it had a lot to do with, Otwa, his organization, which was, what, air, trees, water, and animals or something. It's just like a environmental and friendly organization. And you know that he believed in protecting the environment. Manson didn't believe in things like electricity, and you know, so at least not like the way that we get it now and stuff like that. So it was really kind of interesting to see because it became like a conspiracy in and of its own self. Because then when you go back and you look at the evidence, and because I couldn't find the damn website, I wasn't able to do that. But like one of the main pieces of evidence there was the fact that he wasn't allowed to speak at his own trial, and that is weird.
Right.
Like, that was very suspect. So that was kind of the first, that was kind of my first run in with thinking that maybe Manson is not this crazy evil guy. And you and I have personally, you know, off the record discussed, maybe you and I have, I'm pretty sure you and I have, we've discussed these very mentally ill people. Because when you listen to Charles Manson talk, he sounds nuts, right? He does. He sounds really crazy. But we've kind of talked about what if these people aren't crazy?
Well, my take on him is that he's definitely fucking nuts. He had a long violent history that predated anything having to do with California or the hippie movement or drug use.
He did.
You know, and he, you know,
he had a fucked up childhood.
He had a fucked up childhood. He was in and out of foster homes. He was sexually abused at the foster homes by the other boys. Right before he kind of became the Charles Manson that we know now. He was in Joliet prison, actually, in Illinois.
Yeah.
For I think like some kind of, and all his crimes were federal too. That's how big they were. But he fucking like raping men. Like he was just like he was fucking all over the place. And I guess kind of to tell the story of the book chronologically, where things get really hinky with him is in the mid 60s. He gets transferred from he gets released from jail in California and breaks parole, and he gets released in Los Angeles and is told not to leave Los Angeles and goes directly to San Francisco when this is during the Summer of Love Haight-Ashbury heyday, and checks in with a PO officer in San Francisco by the name of Roger Smith. And that's when things start to get weird. Now, Roger Smith is somebody who was a parole officer, but had Manson as literally his only parolee that he was supervising. Most parole officers have like 100 to 250 parolees that they oversee. Roger Smith just had the one. And Roger Smith was a known, he had a PhD in pharmaceuticals and was like a sociologist who had just recently started working as a parole officer, and just kind of said that he was doing it part-time. Now, Roger Smith would go on to become the foster parent to Manson's first kid. He had a kid with one of the women in the family, and his parole officer adopted the kid and raised him, which is kind of a conflict of interests. It's not something that really normally happens or should happen for lots of different reasons. But that just kind of exemplifies the relationship that they had. Hang on a second. I got dogs acting like dogs.
Your dog's mad.
Yeah. So Manson was a bad dude, but he wasn't, the drug thing was all kind of new to him. And it seems that he was brought to San Francisco deliberately to kind of infiltrate the hippie movement up there and build the family, because that's where the family was built. It was a collection of people that he had met in the Haight-Ashbury area, and then they kind of did their thing and and once again, like getting arrested and like running in trouble with the law, but charges never stuck.
Mhm.
Roger Smith was always petitioning for Manson to be able to leave state and for them to go places. He had filed, and this is all paperwork that the guy, that wrote the book, Tom O'Neill, had found. He had petitioned the parole board to let Manson leave the country because he really wanted him to go to Mexico for some reason, and it's because they were trafficking drugs for the CIA, allegedly. That part, who knows? But there's lots of theories as to why. But there, the thing about Manson and the Manson family is that they were all criminals. They were always getting caught doing shit.
Right.
Yet they were always getting probation, and they were always breaking parole, and they were never facing the consequences for it. So these were criminals, right? And that's something that the meta topic of drugs here for this month and how it kind of factors into this is, a lot's been made about his use of LSD in the MK Ultra program, and we'll kind of define where that stuff intersects in a minute. But it wasn't just LSD that was at play here; it was also the combination of LSD and methamphetamines. And
Okay.
it was seeing what happens. We know what happens with LSD now, right? The
Right.
MK Ultra program started in the 50s. 10 years later, by the end of the 60s, they knew pretty much everything they needed to know about the drug. But now they wanted to see what happens when you start mixing it with shit, right? What happens when you have a lot of sex on acid? What happens when you, and that's, what was that thing I told you about? Operation Midnight Climax.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so
Yes.
so
What
that
is this?
that was, and once again, this is documented. This isn't in part of the fucking documents that were unveiled. The MK Ultra stuff that they found. That was a program where they set up brothels in San Francisco, and they would drug the people. So you ever see like Cat House, like that show on HBO?
Yeah, I know
Okay,
about
so
this.
you
I
know
know
how
about
you go to
this.
the bar and then you go upstairs and you fuck. So at the bar, they were slipping them. They were microdosing them acid. And then they would go upstairs, and then the women would try to get information from these men who were just like, some of them were just like businessmen or whatever. But it was an experiment to see the correlation between sex and drugs. You know what I mean? Like, okay, what happens if we know what happens if you give people acid and you lock them in a fucking dark room for 3 days. They lose their fucking mind. Okay, case closed. Well, what happens if you give people acid and then you have a hooker bang their brains out for 6 hours? How susceptible are they?
Yeah.
How, you know what I mean? How to suggestion? How much can you get them to divulge? How much can you get them to go against? Maybe agree to do things sexually that they wouldn't normally do because they have hangups or that are morally irreprehensible. And that was what that program was about, Midnight Climax, and that was 3 years before Manson even got to San Francisco.
Yeah.
Right, that was like 1964. He gets there 1967. So all that stuff was in play, and what happened was his parole officer who, like I said, was like a scientist, got involved with this other doctor, and they had opened up a free clinic in the Haight-Ashbury area, and this clinic, which is where Manson went for his parole visits, was also it provided abortions and like penicillin and like because everyone's got us they're getting fucking the clap and shit left and right, and people have malnutritions and people are ODing and all this stuff. It was free health services for the community, right?
Okay.
And they did it partially as like philanthropy, like to help the community, but they were also studying the fuck out of everybody that walked in there, because at the time they acid, it kind of like, it started as like, I want to say we got it from the Swedes. It's not an American invention. Like, acid was invented like in Europe, and when we found out what the Russians were doing with it, we wanted to start our own experiments, and somehow we got like the formula from the Swedish people for some reason. I don't know. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think I am. But I don't have the specifics either.
Sure.
So we start doing our experimentations, right? And Timothy Leary was one of the scientists that was responsible for that. He's the one that got the recipe out and kind of released it to the public. Also, there was people in this it's been suggested that you had people like Manson who were getting basically an unlimited supply of it from the CIA and were dumping it into the community to see what was going to happen. They were so afraid of the counterculture movement at the time that they were trying to study what happens, because you got to remember too, like in the 60s, for the first time you had middle class white kids doing drugs in large numbers, right?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
was doing drugs before then? Who was doing heroin in the fucking 20s? Who was smoking weed in the 50s? It wasn't the kid next door. It was miscreants. It was bad kids. It was
Okay.
lower class people.
Right.
And now you saw drugs become commonplace, and you saw people like our parents doing or whatever, and it was like, it was scaring the shit out of the government. You had this anti-war movement. You had the Black Panther Party supported by white people. Oh my God. Racial division had been fucking something since day one in this country. And now you had white middle class kids helping black activists. What the fuck? Like you got to imagine these older people, these people that were born in like 1910, these 50-year-old generals and whatever, scratching their heads saying, what the fuck is going on? And a lot of them were legitimately convinced that there was Russian interference, that the only way you could explain kids from the suburbs smoking weed in 1967 is because of the Russians.
Because
That's the
it
only
does make sense, because that's
these
what was
people.
going on at that time. I mean, that's
And that was that. You got to understand, like, think about what a huge generation, like conceptually, like a huge generation gap there is between those kids and their parents.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And like that was the only conceivable explanation to the youth counterculture movement. And everything just started moving too fucking fast. You had rock and roll, you had drugs, you had civil rights, you had women's rights. You had all of these things happening in the course of like 10 fucking years. And they're just trying to see, like, where is this all going? What's going to happen next? What happens if they win? What happens if we let this happen in small areas? What if we abandon California and
Yeah.
we leave it to Hollywood and we leave San Francisco to the hippies? What's going to happen? What's going to happen here? What's going to happen there? What's going to happen if we let, the Haight-Ashbury, we let these people all walk around and do acid and do communal living, which sounds way too much like communism for these people. What's going to happen? And so there's all these studies going on. And there's all these people you have the CIA, but you also have people that are medical professionals, that are sociologists, that are physicians, that work for the government, that are getting funding from them to do these experiments. And they're all happily doing it because they're going to write their dissertations on this. This is going to be the coursework that's going to define their career as a doctor, right? So you have all of that going on. Now, across the hall from that free clinic is an Air Force colonel who is retired, and he runs just around the corner a flat that is like a crash pad where like anybody can stay, where people can come and live for as long as they want, provided he lets his grad students study them. Okay, that Air Force general has connections to the MK Ultra program. That Air Force general was one of the last people to talk to Jack Ruby alive. Okay, before Jack Ruby lost his mind and fucking after he had been arrested.
Yeah.
All right, so like that guy has a long history with the MK Ultra program, and that's where they think that stuff all comes into play, because Manson's in that area at the time. His parole officer is working across the hall from one of the big wigs of the MK Ultra program that has connections to Jack Ruby, has connections to all this shit. Manson's bringing his people in there. He's recruiting members of his family from that area in the community. You know what I mean? And he's not just picking people. It's because some people take acid and they have positive experiences. Some people take it and they have negative experiences. And this is all stuff that they realize with rats, is that there's some stuff that some get propelled towards violence. And a lot of it has to do with like environmental factors, living in close proximity, crowding, you know what I mean? And they're simulating city environments. Like if we had a bunch of people on acid in a city, like in an apartment building, how is that going to play out different than in suburbia where everyone's spread out? Right.
Yeah.
An apartment, you got people across the hall, you got people above you, people below you. People get psychotic, they fucking kill each other.
Yeah.
Right. What happens when you have but you're in a farm and you're spread out and there's all this space, things go a lot smoother. Well, what happens if you give someone acid and okay, that's one thing. And then you fucking shoot them up with methamphetamines. What do? They turn into fucking murder machines.
Oh yeah.
So that was what they think Manson's connection was that his parole officer saw something innate in him, saw something that he already possessed, right? And they taught him hypnosis. They taught him all this shit. They gave him the drugs. They said, Bill, they gave him the funding. They gave him carte blanche to come and go as he want. They never got arrested for anything. Last show we talked about the stolen car ring that he was running on Spawn Ranch.
Yeah.
That's why he walked away from that. And that's why they didn't that's why they didn't arrest him right away either. Is because they realized, oh my God, he fucking killed Sharon Tate. Like it got too big, and they were like, oh, what the fuck are we gonna do? Because at the end of the day, it's not like the president's running this shit. It's a couple rogue CIA people, and the thing just spirals out of control. And you try to cover your ass, and then things kind of reach a point of critical mass where you're like, okay, we need to figure out how this is going to go public. We need to get it in front of the story. How are we going to do this?
Well, oddly enough, we've seen that happen. We've seen that roll out with the coronavirus in China.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, that shit happens a lot. You don't always kill, Sharon Tate, but it does happen. Things get away from these people. Now, so okay. So what you are kind of saying does kind of back up the claim that this girl was making to release him, because she was trying to show, when you look at that website, which, now we know what it is, we'll link it. It does kind of show more, like in-depth evidence of like who these people are that were involved with the case, who the witnesses were, how these people are paid off, all kinds of stuff. So, but going back to what you were saying now, so they fucked up, right? And this thing kind of created its own monster. First of all, meth is a hell of a drug. Pat, have you ever done meth before?
I have not.
You have not. I have not either. However, I do know that it makes you literally fucking insane. Like it changes. There's like a threshold of only so much meth that you can do before you are mentally ill for the rest of your life because of being on meth. And like it's completely irreversible once you hit that point. It does make you insane. But I don't remember what I was saying. It's all the meth I used to do. What were we talking about? Oh, we were talking about all these ties. So they kind of, saw these criminals, right? They're these already no good people. It's just the same as like a serial killer targeting a prostitute. Nobody's going to miss them. Nobody's going to notice, people, they're the scum of the earth, right? So this made these people really easy targets. But then it got so big that they didn't really have a choice. But what does Hollywood kind of have to do with all this? You were kind of talking about some really troubling shit when it came to like.
Well, yeah. So after, I think they did everything they could do in San Francisco, and also, you're talking about like this Air Force colonel that had the office across from the
right
free clinic. I mean, people like he didn't. These are like like I said, 40 and 50-year-old career military people that try to like grow their hair out and wear like tie-dye shirts. And people are like, whatever, pig. Like,
yeah,
it wasn't the perfect cover.
Sure.
But the free clinic kind of had more success because people needed those services anyway.
Yeah.
And they even say that like his flop house that he was trying to run, it didn't really go so well. And even if, and you also have a lot of like, sex and drugs happening. And even if you weren't necessarily all about the drugs, a lot of these people were still all about the sex, and you had a lot of free women and women being, open with their bodies or drugged out of their fucking minds and having no idea what they're doing.
Right.
And the other thing that happened is that they had like there was two incidents. One they had like a sex party or something, And one of the people that was there was like a 16-year-old boy that was underage and happened to be the kid of a San Francisco County whatever sheriff. So he goes home and he's all fucked up, and he tells his parents what happened. And I don't know what they gave me, and there was naked men there and all this kind of stuff. And his parents wig out, and his dad they come in and they throw these fuckers in jail. And this is a hard one to get out of, right? Because right now they've been getting they get caught with a stolen car and they walk free the next day, right? Or they get caught with possession, they go free the next day. Something like this, not so much. And the other thing is they had this bus that they drove around in, and they all got super fucked up and passed out and pulled the bus over and then fell asleep in the ditch on the side of the road next to the bus, and they were all naked. And the police come across it and they see all these people passed out on drugs, and they find a 1-week-old baby in the bus that was like malnourished and had sores and was dirty and stuff. And once again, the hammer gets thrown down. You can only fucking push this shit so far. So basically, they all went in front of a judge, miraculously all got parole, even though some of them were violating parole at that point. And at that point, they had to move back to LA County because that's where a lot of their charges stem from. So they go back to LA County and they move out to Spawn Ranch. And that's where things get weird. And there's a couple different theories as to why. So this book doesn't have all the answers. Let me just say that too.
Okay.
But it definitely has new information, but it does not offer a definitive timeline of events as to what happened. And, it's kind of like it's just more info because nobody really knows the truth as to what happened because there's so many fucking moving parts to it. But so they think that possibly, being in San Francisco kind of grounded everything, and they were part of a society and a culture, one that was more open and forgiving, and you could walk around all fucked up, and there wasn't so much ridicule or anything like that, and they had access to all these free services and shit, so they lived a lot better, as opposed to they moved down to LA and Spawn Ranch, and now they're isolated on this old cowboy movie set. And they're left to their own devices. They can do whatever the fuck they want. And they're also living a lot harder. And they have to turn to crime more just to survive just to kind of keep their lifestyle afloat. Right. Okay. But at the same time, they have all these women. And that's the thing that kind of that's how Manson was able to, he had obviously these women were all under his control. And, imagine you're a guy that's got a dozen girls with him that will fuck whoever you tell them to on command. So I don't know, anybody, if you find the right person where you can just say, hey, I want you to do this for me. I want you to invite me to this party, or I want you to, give us free drugs, or I want you to do this, and you can bang 2 or 3 of these girls all night if you want. That works with a lot of people. Right.
I have experience with this. So.
Yeah. So you talk about how the whole Dennis Wilson thing happened. Yeah. Pussy.
Right.
Or the Terry Felcher thing, who was the record producer. Pussy. Why were they hanging out with Warren Beatty, or why were they going to these fucking parties? Why were they let through the front door? Pussy.
As wild as it sounds, it does work.
He had a lot of it, and these women did whatever he told them to do, and people started to become fascinated with this cult that he had, and they admired him. And like I said, he was a charismatic guy. He knew how to hold an audience, and hey, how much pussy do I have to give you for you to just let me record a record, a 45, an A side and a B side? Come on. You do hundreds of these a year. Let me do one. And you want to get fucked for 10 days straight? Whatever. We'll make it happen.
Yeah, it works.
You know what I mean?
Wow. That's true. I guess I'd never really thought about that before, even though, like I said, I have experience with that, but it does work. Wow. That's very interesting. I'm over here just listening. So here's my thing about what I'm hearing so far about this book. I would like to read it. I think it sounds very interesting. MK Ultra in general, especially when you're talking, we found 20,000 documents. How long is this book, Pat? How do you know how many pages this book is?
Well, it's actually close to 600, but the narrative part is only about 430,
Right.
and then there's about 170, which is all notes and stuff, and like references and footnotes and where the information came from and all that stuff, fact checking.
Right. And so I know when we did the MK Ultra episode, I wanted to put down the like a direct link to where you can find the files, the documents. Again, there's not 20,000 pages, 20,000 documents, and those individual documents can be, whatever. I mean, they could be
Right.
3 pages, they could be 60 pages,
Right.
most of the time they're the latter. And so you got 20,000 separate documents, and this guy's kind of, probably went through a good portion of them, which is why it's taken him, 20 years to write this book. Just imagine sitting down to read all that. So there's so much to it. And then not just that, this is just the things, this is just Project MK Ultra. And there are offshoots of that project. So when you sit down and look at everything that was kind of happening and you put it all in like this timeline, and then you hit the point where you're talking about the, I'm not going to say coincidences, the ties to the Manson family and how it all kind of was happening at the same time in the same area. I guess what you have to ask yourself at that point is if you believe in coincidences or not. Either this was just a crazy happenstance of accidents or it wasn't. And, I think that, I think when you do really start digging and looking, and that's just talking about the time. Does that go into the trial at all? Does it talk about the different people that were involved in the trial and whatnot?
Well, the main antagonist for the book is the prosecuting attorney, the DA.
Which he's the one that wrote the Helter Skelter.
Helter Skelter, yeah.
Right.
Because he is kind of the corrupt architect of this cover story. And obviously he was doing it because he was probably told to, but he's the one that manipulated the evidence to come up with this cover story in the first place. But it's doubtful that he was working alone or of his own volition. Like, he was obviously put up to this by somebody. But yeah, so he's kind of it talks about that, but it doesn't do like a day by day trial thing. It talks about what certain witnesses said on the stand. More importantly, what witnesses weren't called because they offered conflicting viewpoints, and how just kind of some of the information was maligned to paint specific pictures that backed up the Helter Skelter theory.
Right. Which, of course, he had a horse in the race. I mean, he went on to write a book, and that book netted him a lot of money. And
right. I mean, that was his career defining moment in his life. But he tried to run for office twice after that, and both times defeated because of scandals that broke in the middle of the elections. And the scandals involve him like trying to fucking he beat the shit out of his mistress to the point where she trying to get her to miscarry, which is a fucked up way to go about things. Trust me, I know. And the other one was he had broken into somewhere, I don't know, some shit with the fucking cops, but he wasn't a good dude. And he kind of he came up with a lot of the stories that he came up with to protect some people in Hollywood and to protect the government shit. And he never touched upon any of the parole violation stuff. Never brought in Manson's old parole officer, who was this guy that was a CIA spook and doctor and stuff. So no, he very much kind of created the sham trial just to make sure that things went off the way they wanted to go off, which painted a larger picture of youth gone wild and the dangers of drug use, which is ultimately what they wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, right. And again, so that leads, back into, like I said, kind of where I started this was because the claim that old Afton Burton was making was that they were just using the Manson case and Charles Manson himself as an example to make an example out of him. And it sounds like there may have been something to that, because they didn't want people to know that this could not only be, just they still wanted people to see that this was a bad thing, that there was this bad movement happening and the drugs were out of control. And, meanwhile, they're the ones feeding the drugs to everybody. And still to this day, the government has their hand in the drug trade. And you're silly if you don't believe that they do.
Right. I think basically like the Reader's Digest version of what this book proposes happened is, the government funded the Manson family initially. It created the Manson family to study it, to see how it could be formed. They didn't create Charles Manson necessarily. He kind of existed.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of bad men in the world. They don't need to make more of them. But they found this bad man that fit whatever psychological criteria they had on their list. They, gave him resources. They gave him enough rope to kind of make this thing happen. And he did it, and they studied it, and it basically got out of control.
Yeah.
And and then they tried to cover it up, which is what they did.
So then the claim is that what? So they let them get away with all these petty crimes for so long because they needed to, because they were there.
Well, and then there's also the chance that, once they got in bed with Manson and they started letting him do this, he could have blown the whistle. Now they could have threatened to kill him, or they could have threatened to do this, or killed, other members of the family, or like, look, if you talk, because he wasn't allowed to talk on stand at his trial, but like, it's not exactly like the dude didn't have the public's ear after that. You know what I mean? There was plenty of opportunity for him to kind of go public and get a message out to the press. And he never did that. He may have made cryptic allegations, but he never went on the record and said, I was working for the fucking CIA or my parole officer, yada, yada, yada. And this is why I was let go. It was more, I feel like he probably had more power dangling, threatening to tell the truth than if he had just done it.
Okay.
Now, why they didn't have him killed in jail like so many other people, I don't know. Maybe he was just too popular for that to have happened. But then again, look at, they killed fucking Epstein, and no one really gives a shit about that anymore.
I know,
that's old news. That's old ass news.
And it blows my fucking mind. Maybe we'll cover that. I don't know, one of these days. But okay.
I think everyone kind of knows that one already. That'll be a quick episode if ever need to fill 20 minutes of podcast.
How many people don't know whose names are actually on the flight logs that you can go and read by yourself? Like you can look at them and see whose names are. Now, some of them are abbreviated with initials, so you can't really. It's not really fair to assume that it's so and so. But some of them are very clear on who.
Like is T. Hanks Tom Hanks, or is it like, Teresa Hanks, like
right.
his sister-in-law? I don't know.
Right. It could be. Wait, Pat, if it's his sister-in-law, they wouldn't have the same last name.
Now, if it's his brother's wife,
oh wait, that's
fucking
true.
head. Jesus Christ! I gotta walk you through this.
Maybe I got high today. I don't know. I'm super stupid. I don't know. Something. Whatever. I'm trying to make some excuse up. But anyway. The point is that you can read those flight logs yourself. So when you see this dumb shit and you're like, oh, so and so was on that flight, and that's like, but they weren't though. Like you can go read it, and then they're like, and then you mention like who was on the flight, and it's all crickets, and it's like you can go and see it yourself. Anyway. Back to what I was saying. The point that I was going to make before we started talking about Epstein. So do you think that based off of what you read from the book, because this is kind of a big question when it comes to Manson, do you think that the family went to Sharon Tate's house to take out her and or Roman Polanski?
So
because hold on, because the claim is that they thought that Terry Melcher lived in that house, and he did previously.
Is it Melcher or Felcher? Maybe I'm thinking of gerbils up the ass. Melcher.
Right. Yeah, Terry Melcher. See, I did a little bit of research. I know my stuff a little bit. But no, so they, so that's the claim, was that they went to the wrong house and killed the wrong people.
No. One theory that's in there was that there was you know, they were at that house, and some of the Manson people were there for a party a couple weeks previous with some drug dealers that were also had CIA ties, and that they didn't really like these guys. They were kind of like bad, everyone kind of just tolerated them. Not the Manson people, but the drug dealers. And they were kind of just like buffoons, but they were selling drugs and whatever. You need someone to sell dope at the party, so you let them in. But they OD'd like on heroin. One of the guys OD'd on heroin and passed out. So he's in like, that fucking heroin coma thing from like Uma Thurman in Pulp Fiction.
Okay.
And that Jay Sebring and this other guy who was one of the victims of the murder, he was this like Polish immigrant that was selling lots of MDMA and like just living at the Polanski house, that they took turns like raping him in front of everyone at the party. And then like threw him out on the front lawn. And that there might even be like videotape of this too, or like film.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he wakes up and his drug buddies, well, his two buddies who are like this like drug ring, one of them has like very strong CIA ties. They take him to like wherever they're living at the time, and they chain him to a tree. So when he wakes up, he doesn't run back there and kill these fucking people. And he wakes up and he's freaking out, and his like belt's cut, and he could tell that like, he got gangbanged in the ass.
Sure.
And like he's like wigging out and shit. And they tell him like, look, dude, they were all getting ready to go to Jamaica the next day to like location scout a movie, quote unquote, but like clearly they were smuggling drugs. But
Sure.
like that's like the story now is like, yeah, and then the next day we left for Jamaica, and they were in Jamaica when the murders happened.
Yeah.
However, they knew the Manson family. They had connections with them through Cass Elliott of the Mamas and the Papas, who I guess was like this huge surveillance figure for them, for the government during the time, because she would have parties all the time in California, and it's like where a bunch of like drug things intersected or some shit. I don't know. That's another fucking story for another podcast. But that they think that because they sold drugs to Manson and they knew Manson and they had a criminal relationship with him, that before they skipped town, they went to Chuck and said, hey, can you make this happen? And that's why they went and did that. And that because so many people were at that party and saw what happened, that when they turned up dead, they knew that it was like, that's why everyone like, kind of was like, oh my God, like they deserved it, or they had it coming, or they knew that this had something to do with those crazy fucking Manson people and the drug dealers and all the drugs and sex and women and all this stuff. So that's a theory that's put forth from the book. And if you don't believe that it was random, which it goes to great lengths to prove that it wasn't, then that's really kind of like in the vacuum of the Helter Skelter theory dropping out. That's kind of the only thing that's left.
Okay.
And that's just kind of seedy enough for me to buy. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Ooh, okay.
Well, I mean, just like, what are the odds? Like, Roman Polanski was supposed to be back home that day, and that's why there was a bunch of people at the house.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was supposed to come back home that day, and Sharon Tate was upset because he was delayed. He was tight. He called her and said, hey, I'm not going to be home today. And that's when I think it was Sharon Tate's sister, I don't remember, she called over a couple of people to go kind of keep her company until Roman got back. And so while he's gone, that's when the murders took place. Also, Manson himself has said that he was just at that house 2 weeks prior to the murders happening. So he knew that Terry Melcher didn't live there anymore.
Well, he also said that he was there after it happened, and that he left. They switched the crime scene around. That's something he went on record to say. and that he left sunglasses there or something. They did a bunch of, they moved the bodies, and they did some shit just to make the crime scene look more confusing. And yeah, and they think that when he did that, he was with. Hang on a second. Yeah, I'm almost done. Yeah, we'll go. I'm almost done. All right. That's my beautiful wife. My beautiful busty wife. Yeah, we're recording right now. Everyone knows now that you got.
Everybody knows that you got big bosoms.
Oh. Yeah. So yeah. He knew about it, and I forget the guy that he had with him that he went back there with, but it was somebody that called Terry before the police did and let him know that there was murders at that house. So yeah, there's a lot of hinky shit with that. And like I said, I defer back to it was they didn't go, it wasn't an accident that they went there, and they went there probably because they could have been contracted by this other group. Because there was really no other reason to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess I just wanted to see if there was any type of speculation. So after after reading what you've read, what do you think is the likely story here? Do you think that Manson just ran some crazy cult? Do you think that the Helter Skelter thing holds water? Do you think that this new theory is where it's at? What do you think?
No, I definitely agree. I definitely drink the Kool-Aid that the book is saying, because it ties into stuff that we already know about MK Ultra. Yeah. I think that it was a social experiment gone awry, and they gave this guy too much freedom to do what he wanted to do, and maybe a lot of it had to do with the girls. I think people severely underestimate the power, because it's all guys running this shit. There's no like female agents at that point, or like female like director of fucking,
women were still at home with kids and things like that.
It's all guys.
Yeah.
It's all guys, and then you have like these barely legal fucking 16, 17, 18, year old women that are just, attractive and banging anything that moves or whatever.
Well, and during like the women's rights, movements and things like that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
yeah. So I think it was just, it was the 60s, and this was, whether or not the CIA wanted to admit it, they were kind of infected with the chaotic nature of the era anyway. And as much as they were trying to find ways to reestablish control and discredit the counterculture movements, it didn't work like that. They looked into the abyss, and the abyss looked back at them, and they became what they were trying so hard to guard against. And I mean, I think it begs the greater philosophical question of like, what is control? And sometimes, the more you try to establish and the more you try to maintain control, sometimes the more you lose control of things. And that, chaos is kind of seen as a negative force in the universe, but it's in a lot of ways, it's a positive one. And when destruction occurs is when you try to prevent chaos in some way, So I don't know. I think that I buy it. I buy the book, and like I said, the book is very careful to not make claims that it can't back up. There's a lot of things that it can back up, and it doesn't claim to have the definitive answer of the truth, because it's probably too big and too weird and too complicated. You would need 3 of these fucking books, which I'm not going to read.
It happened so long ago now at this point. I mean, does it even matter,
Well, first of all, for historical context, yes, I think it matters. I think definitely, because I see it's interesting, all the shades of what you see happening in our own government. So the DA that's kind of the antagonist of the book, when he realized that the author was writing this book about him and had collected the evidence that he had, he wrote letters to the press and the publisher of the book to try to discredit the author by calling him a pedophile.
Wow.
Yeah, because he was a gay. The author's gay, and he was involved in he had a much younger partner. But like, the author's like 40 and he was banging a 29-year-old dude. Like, that's not that bad. You know what I mean? Like, that's pretty normal for gay people. I don't know how many gay dudes you know, but like
Well,
they usually go younger, you know? So like that's not like scandalously imbalanced. But once again, oh, how interesting. You know, we fall back on the pedophile thing when we try to discredit somebody or ruin their image, or when you want someone shunned and locked away. Okay. You know, it just the Russian collusion. Oh, the only way that the youth counterculture movement could exist is with Russians fixing it. Russians must be interfering.
yeah.
You know, and how much does that sound like the election? The only way Trump could have won is if the Russians fixed the election.
Now
Well,
we still blame the Russians for everything, don't we?
no, dude, it's your crazy fucking uncle. That's why. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing, is that like it's interesting because like there's a lot of this stuff has not gone away, and you're hearing the same shit and you're seeing the same tricks, and that's the thing with establishment, is that they fear creativity, they fear change, so they don't learn any new games. You know?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is relevant to be able to learn. You know, we say that so that history doesn't repeat itself, and you know, here we are. But then again, we only have half the story. We don't even. And you know, let me just remind everybody again. Most of the MK Ultra documents were destroyed.
Right.
You know, we'll never have the full story now at this point. And you know, that's and most of the probably whatever missing pieces there are to this book, I mean, you probably could have found in those documents, and that's why they destroyed. You know, we've talked about, maybe they destroyed the worst ones first. You know, and that might have been, those might have been the worst ones.
Yeah, the stuff they found were all. I mean, it talks about that, and that was crazy too, because we had just we had just covered this in the episode. But yeah, what they found were all those documents that were not destroyed. Those were financial documents, so it wasn't the really cool like case files, like, you know, observation report stuff.
Right.
It was just the financial stuff. However, you could piece that together, and there was enough damning information in that to kind of get them what they needed.
Tell you a story, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But in no way a complete story. And there's way more that, like you said, we'll never know.
Yeah, that we just never will know. I do find it very interesting. You know, I think it is a possibility. You know, either way, Manson's, you know, he's dead now, right? I mean, he can never talk, but he always maintained his innocence. And he did try to speak, but he was always silenced, and, you know, couldn't really talk, or like he would do these interviews, and, you know, when he did do the interviews, and everybody knows, you watch him, you know, crazy Uncle Charlie, he starts going off on these tangents. And is that because like he's been kind of made insane because of the experiments that might have taken place, or, you know?
There could be some of that. I mean, there's definitely they prove basically that the MK Ultra stuff, like the author was interviewing somebody, goes, you know, is Charles Manson like this textbook case of MK Ultra gone wrong? And they're like, no, it's the textbook case of MK Ultra gone right. Like, this is exactly what they were trying to fucking do. Right. You know?
It was like chills.
Yeah, and like that I think just the after effect of what he went through back then, I don't think that like they're still microdosing him in a cell, or that. Like,
no, I agree with that. Right.
I think he's fucking nuts, and like he was probably nuts when they pulled him out of jail. Like, he had the dude had there was, like I said, he was a plenty bad enough dude before any of this stuff happened. Before, when he was just a criminal, fucking raping people and stealing cars.
He did sound crazy, but the fact of the matter is that somehow he was able to win these people over. And if that same person was the person that you see on the fucking ABC interviews and shit, like, how could someone like that win all these people over? He had to have been a different person then. I think that crazy then. You know what I mean? He did, but it wasn't like he had a way to do it where people understood what he was saying.
He was younger. He didn't have a swastika carved in his head. It was the 60s. It was San Francisco. He was probably a little bit more coherent. He wasn't in an orange jumpsuit. He had fucking been out in the sun. Like, yeah, I think it was, you know, you kind of turn back the clock a little bit, and you realize it's a different time. And even then he seemed fucking weird.
Yeah.
Like, trust me, there was plenty of people that like got the fucking creeps from him that
Oh,
were
yeah.
like, oh no, you know, like when he met with Terry Melcher, the record producer. Yeah, Dennis Wilson had fucking vouched for this guy and said, you gotta check him out. You know, he's you know, he's got some talent. He's written some songs for us, and you know, he's very charismatic. But Melcher met him and was like, I can't put this guy on a fucking record. You know what I mean? Like people
Well,
that were like that
yeah.
were not into like the fucking scene at the time took one look at him and were like, yo, this dude's bad sauce. You know?
And the crazy thing about it is that he really, like, Charles Manson really was, like, really talented. Like, his songs, they're good. No, listen, have you listened to them? They're good.
Of course, I'm a Guns N' Roses fan. I fucking listen to them.
No, they're pretty good. And so it's like, well, you know, but then again, I mean, you know, how many artists out there are, you know, good artists that never make it? I mean, you know, whatever. I don't know.
I'm one of them.
Just right.
I have albums of house music that hopefully somebody covers one day after
One of these days, right? Well, I mean,
sex cult dies in a shootout somewhere.
you know, that's
Wisconsin.
just, right. That's just I mean, that's just how it goes sometimes. But either way, with this new perspective, go back and listen. All I'm saying is, you know, go back and listen to the Charles Manson interviews. Maybe you might catch something that might make more sense in hindsight, knowing that he may have been a CIA experiment.
Right.
So, but I don't know. Do you have anything else to add about drugs or MK Ultra or Charles Manson before we wrap up the month of drugs here?
I know it's bittersweet. This went really well. I think overall this month's meta topic it
was a good series. It was a little series that we had going on. It's really fun. Well, I'm excited. You know, we're gonna jump into some different stuff. You know, now following next week and the following month. But this has been a lot of fun. We'll probably touch on it eventually another day. Because the government's always fucking shit up. So I don't know. But okay, well, I guess that's gonna be it then, guys. With that being said, we will see you back here next Wednesday.